The missing hours. Chapter 1: The Awakening. Lena jolted awake, gasping for air as though she had been holding her breath for hours. Her heart pounded in her chest, and the room around her spun in a dizzying blur. She was disoriented, confused, and worst of all, terrified. The sun was beginning to rise, casting faint rays of light through the window blinds. It was the only thing that told her it was morning. But where was she? How did she get here? As she sat up, she noticed something that made her stomach churn. Her clothes were soaked in blood. It clung to her skin, sticky and drying in patches on her hands, arms, and even her face. Panic surged through her body as she scrambled out of bed. Trying to make sense of what she was seeing. This wasn't her bed. This wasn't her room. Her eyes darted around the unfamiliar space. It was a small, dingy motel room. The floral-patterned bedspread beneath her was old and tattered. The air smelled musty. And a single chair sat in the corner, near a television that looked like it hadn't worked in years. She caught sight of herself in the mirror hanging above the dresser and gasped again. Her reflection was almost unrecognizable. The woman staring back at her had wild hair, smeared makeup, and bloodstains on her face. What happened? Lena whispered to herself, backing away from the mirror. She grabbed her phone from the nightstand, her hands trembling as she unlocked the screen. 6:15 a.m. Friday. That didn't seem right. The last thing she remembered was sitting with her friend Kelly at a local bar, sipping on drinks. It was supposed to be a fun night out. But now there was a gap. A huge, terrifying gap in her memory. The last time she checked her phone was Wednesday night. Where had the last 24 hours gone? And why was she covered in blood? Chapter 2: The Missing Friend. The panic didn't stop as Lena scrolled through her phone, searching for any messages, calls, or pictures that might give her a clue about what had happened. But there was nothing. No texts, no calls. Her phone was as blank as her memory. A sudden, horrible thought crossed her mind. Kelly. Where was Kelly? They had been together the last time Lena could remember anything. She frantically searched her phone again, trying to find any trace of her friend, but there were no messages from Kelly either. She tried calling her. The phone rang once, then twice, and then went straight to voicemail. Lena's heart sank. Something was wrong, and she had to find out what. Throwing on her jacket, Lena stumbled out of the motel room, her legs shaky and her head spinning. She didn't even know what town she was in, but she knew she had to retrace her steps. Maybe someone had seen her. Maybe someone knew where Kelly was. Chapter 3: The First Clue. Lena's mind raced as she hurried down the empty streets, trying to orient herself. The motel was on the outskirts of town, a place she had never been before. As she walked, she kept wiping her hands on her jacket, trying to get rid of the feeling of the blood that stained her skin. She couldn't stop thinking about Kelly. What if something terrible had happened? What if? What if she was involved? She shivered at the thought. No, she couldn't have done anything like that. But the blood on her hands suggested otherwise. After wandering for what felt like hours, Lena found herself in front of a small convenience store. A few people were inside, milling about and getting their morning coffee. She hesitated before walking in, her eyes scanning the faces of the strangers, hoping to see someone familiar. The cashier, a middle-aged man with a gruff look, glanced up as she entered. He stared at her for a moment, his expression hard to read. Lena felt her stomach tighten. Did he recognize her? "Hey, do you remember me?" Lena asked hesitantly, approaching the counter. The man frowned, leaning forward slightly. "You were in here last night, weren't you?" Lena's heart skipped a beat. "Last night? Yes, I think so. Do you remember what I was doing?" He gave her a suspicious look. "You and that other girl, your friend, I guess came in around midnight. You bought a couple of things and left. You two didn't look so good. Seemed like you had too much to drink." Lena's throat went dry. "Kelly, my friend. Do you remember where we went after?" He shook his head slowly. "You were talking about heading to some house party? That's all I know. Didn't look like a good idea, if you ask me." Chapter 4: The House Party. The house party? That had to be where everything went wrong. Lena thanked the cashier and left the store, her mind whirling with possibilities. The pieces were starting to come together, but there were still too many gaps. She didn't know where the party was or who was there, but if she had gone, then someone had to know more. She needed to find out where that house was. After what felt like hours of walking, Lena's phone buzzed in her hand. It was a text message from an unknown number. "Unknown? You shouldn't be asking questions." Her heart stopped. She quickly replied, her fingers shaking. "Lena, who is this? Where is Kelly?" But there was no response. Whoever it was, they didn't want her to know more. But now, Lena was more determined than ever to find out the truth. Chapter 5: The Trail of Blood. Lena's search for answers led her to the other side of town, where the houses were larger and more isolated. It felt wrong, walking through the quiet streets in the early morning. She passed a few people out jogging, but no one paid attention to her. Finally, she came upon a house that looked familiar, like something she had seen in her haze of memories. The lawn was littered with empty beer cans and the remnants of a wild party. Lena's stomach churned as she approached the front door. The windows were dark, and there was no sign of life inside, but something about the house pulled her toward it. She stepped onto the porch, her hand reaching for the doorknob. It was unlocked. The door creaked open, and Lena stepped inside. The house was a mess. There were bottles and trash everywhere, and the smell of stale alcohol lingered in the air. But what caught her attention was the faint, dark stain on the carpet. Lena's knees nearly buckled as she knelt down, staring at the stain. It was large, too large to ignore. Flashes of fragmented memories flickered in her mind, screaming, someone running, the sound of glass breaking. It was all coming back to her, but none of it made sense. Kelly, Lena whispered to herself. She had to find Kelly. Chapter 6: The Confrontation. As Lena continued through the house, she heard footsteps behind her. She spun around, her heart racing, and came face to face with a man. He was tall, with dark eyes that seemed to pierce through her. "Looking for something?" he asked, his voice cold and sharp. Lena backed away, her heart hammering in her chest. "I'm looking for my friend, Kelly. Do you know where she is?" The man's lips twisted into a cruel smile. "You shouldn't have come here." Before Lena could react, he lunged toward her, grabbing her arm with a vice-like grip. She struggled, trying to break free, but he was too strong. Chapter 7: The Escape. Lena's heart raced as she fought against the man's grip. Panic surged through her, but her survival instincts kicked in. She twisted her body and swung her free arm toward him, aiming for his face. Her fist connected with his jaw, and the man stumbled back, momentarily loosening his hold. Without thinking, Lena bolted toward the front door. Her legs felt weak beneath her, but fear pushed her forward. She could hear the man's heavy footsteps behind her, closing in fast. She flung the door open and dashed into the front yard, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She didn't stop running. Her mind was blank, operating on pure adrenaline. She sprinted down the street, weaving between parked cars and heading for the nearest busy road. The sound of traffic became her lifeline. If she could just reach somewhere public, she might be safe. As she reached the main road, she glanced back to see if the man was still following her. He wasn't there. She slowed down slightly, gasping for breath as she clutched her side. Lena's chest heaved with exhaustion, but she couldn't stop. Not yet. She had to keep moving. Her mind raced with questions. Who was that man? Why had he attacked her? And more importantly, where was Kelly? Chapter 8: A Call for Help. Lena stumbled into a nearby cough, her legs barely holding her up. She looked around, hoping that no one would notice her disheveled appearance. Her clothes were still stained with blood, and her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear. She quickly ducked into a corner booth, pulling out her phone to call the police. Her fingers trembled as she dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? Came the calm voice of the operator. I need help, Lena stammered, her voice shaking. I woke up covered in blood, and I don't know what happened. My friend Kelly is missing. I think something terrible happened. The operator's tone became more serious. Where are you right now? I'm at a cafe on Elm Street. Please send someone. I don't know what to do. Stay on the line. Help is on the way, the operator assured her. Lena put the phone down, her hands still trembling. She felt trapped, lost in a nightmare she couldn't escape. How could she not remember anything? How could she not know if she was responsible for Kelly's disappearance? And what if the police thought she was guilty? As she sat there, waiting for the police to arrive, Lena's mind wandered back to the night she and Kelly had gone to the bar. They had been celebrating something. But what? The details were fuzzy, but she remembered Kelly had been acting strange, nervous, even. Was it possible that Kelly had gotten into some kind of trouble?